Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Please welcome the Executive Director of Chinese Language and Culture Initiatives for the College Board, Bob Davis.
女士们、先生们，掌声有请美国大学理事会中国语言与文化项目执行主任戴敬山先生。
Hey, good morning, everybody. How are you? Doing good? We made it to the final day of NCLC 17, and I think it's been a good time. Have you all enjoyed yourselves so far? Great. I know there was a lot going on in Houston last night, and I imagine, well, how many of you dressed up in anime costumes and went out and partied last night? Yeah, I see you. I know about you. When we found out that the anime conference was sort of sharing the space with us, at first we thought it might be strange, and it's actually turned out to be quite fun. I've had some really interesting elevator interactions in the last couple of days. And I've learned a lot about Japanese anime. People were asking me what I was dressed as, and I keep on telling them I'm dressed as a Japanese salaryman, and they're like, oh, it's really on point. So it's been fun. I hope it's been added a little color to the festivities. So we are at our final plenary of NCLC 17, and I'm really very excited to be able to introduce it. You know, our 10-year anniversary has given us a terrific opportunity to sort of pause and reflect, but also to think forward about what the next 10 years will bring in the field. We were meeting this morning, some colleagues, and we were thinking about the first year and how the speakers who spoke on our first year, I was included, really had a lot of sort of conversations. We were apprehensive and we were nervous about the field. We couldn't imagine what it would become. And 10 years later, a lot of that nervousness is gone. I think we have a lot more confidence about it, and we have a lot more excitement, and we feel this wave of momentum that's coming from the schools and communities, and also that challenges us in the field to do better and bigger things. And so we're very, very excited about it, and I can't believe we've reached 10 years already of this conference, and as Jeff and I mentioned yesterday, we're very excited about 10 years to come as well. From expanding K-12 programs to higher ed programs, to students traveling abroad and educators traveling abroad, and to wonderful federal and state initiatives as well as international initiatives, this field is booming. And again, we thanked you yesterday, but I want to thank you again because at the end of the day, what this really comes down to are the teachers and students in the classroom who are making this happen. And we are so appreciative, and we are excited to be along on this journey with you. And as a favor, I would ask for you to never be silent. If there are things that you think that we all can be doing better and things that you think that are missing in this field, please speak up so that we know and we can help be better partners with you as we move forward. So our panel today is a decade of progress, reflections of the last 10 years in the field. And we have a terrific group of people, many of the people who I think that you know and maybe have worked with over the years. Maybe some of them were your students, and maybe some of them were your teachers as well. And moderating the panel, we have a wonderful person who I know that you all know, Marty Abbott, who is the Executive Director of the American Council on Teaching a Foreign Language, as we all know as ACTFL. Her career began in Fairfax County Public Schools in Virginia, where she was a language teacher, World Language Coordinator, and the Director of High School Instruction. She's served on many, many different boards and has done terrific things in all of them, including, and she was also the president of ACTFL in 2003 and has served as the Executive Director of ACTFL since 2011. Under Marty's leadership, ACTFL has created the Center for Assessment, Research, and Development and launched the wonderful public awareness campaign, Lead with Languages, which we've been featuring throughout the conference, and I really encourage you to check out. She recently served as commissioner for the American Academy of Arts and Sciences National Report, America's Languages, Investing in Language Education in the 21st Century. In 2016, Marty was appointed by President Obama to serve a 4-year term on the National Security Education Board. She's busy. Let's be honest, she's doing a lot out there. While her language of mastery is Spanish, Marty has been an amazing and consistent supporter of Chinese as well, and actually all languages in language and cultural education in the United States. She's a true champion of this field, and it's somebody who we appreciate so much for all that she's done. Marty's the type of leader who is always available to think together with you on how to solve problems that are in the field, and often is the person who comes up with the solution as well. I'm very proud to call Marty a friend, and also I have to be honest and say that she's been a teacher to me over the last decade. I've come to her often, and I've watched her, and I've learned so much in every interaction I've had with her, and I'm very, very proud to be able to introduce her today. And Marty will introduce the panel when she comes up, and I think that you're really going to enjoy this conversation. And the reason we put this plenary at the final, as our final plenary, is because we knew that it was just this great chance for us all to sort of sit together, have a moment of reflection, and then move forward to the next decade of great work together. So please join me in welcoming Marty Abbott.
Thank you, Bob. Good morning, everyone. How are you doing? I'm really honored to be moderating the plenary this morning, and I like to call it the boots on the ground plenary, because these people have been integrally involved in promoting Chinese language programs, as have many of you in the audience. And we've had a lot of national initiatives over the last 10 years. The Star Talk program, and Laura Murray, the conceptor of that program, is in our audience this morning. Hello, Laura. The AP Chinese program, the flagship program, Seal of Biliteracy. There have been a number of national initiatives that have helped propel the field forward. So what we'll be doing this morning is reflecting, as Bob said, on those initiatives and informing you. If you have a new program, we hope that you'll be inspired by what people on the panel have accomplished, and then talking about what does success in the future look like, and how can we continue to move our field forward. So I'd like to invite our panelists to come up and join me on the stage, and we will get started. They represent a wide variety of perspectives and have been involved at different pivotal points in the movement forward of the field. You'll see their names up on the screen, and you'll also read about their backgrounds in your program, but I'd like to have them just briefly introduce themselves. Ryan, we'll start with you.
Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Ryan Wertz, and I have the great honor of serving as the lead consultant for world languages at the Ohio Department of Education. And today I'm also wearing a second hat, and that is of the immediate past president of the National Council of State Supervisors for Languages, which is a national organization of state-level world language professionals who have leadership roles in the state departments of education and who advocate for all languages in their states.
Great. Maquita?
Thank you. Hi, I'm Maquita Alexander. I'm the head of Washington Yu Ying Public Charter School. I'm also the parent of 3 Chinese language learners, and a student of Chinese language myself.
Hi, I'm Kevin Shimota. You may have seen me yesterday on the same stage in my other role as WeChat marketing team working for Tencent. But I'm also a U.S.-China Strong student ambassador from Seattle, Washington. I've been learning Mandarin for 9 years.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Claudia Ross. I'm a professor of Chinese at the College of the Holy Cross in Worcester, Massachusetts, a former president of the Chinese Language Teachers Association, a Star Talk program director, a member of the New England Chinese Language Teachers Association. I've been involved in the field for a very long time. I teach Chinese, I learn Chinese, and I've been learning Chinese for 47 years. Wow.
各位传道、授业解惑者，早上好。My name is Matt Coss. I am here representing a student perspective. I'm from Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm here to talk about Star Talk. I'm here to talk about what it's been like being a student of Chinese for the last 12 years and how I came to be sitting on this panel today. I'm looking forward to it.
大家早上好. I'm Lucy Lee. I'm representing class, which is Chinese Language Association of Secondary Elementary School. I'm also teaching at the Livingston High School. I think my favorite title is as a Chinese language teacher at the K-12 school.
Great, welcome to all of you. I think we can agree that in the United States, our interest in specific languages and our enrollments always reflect an ebb and a flow of that kind of interest. But I think we can also all agree that the interest in Mandarin is really here to stay. So my first question for the panelists is, what were some of the pivotal moments for you over the last 10 years when you had the realization that Mandarin is really integrated into our curriculum at all levels these days, and the interest is there and will continue? And what were some of the compelling forces behind those pivotal moments that took place? Let's start with Claudia at the post-secondary level.
Okay, so we started having this conversation earlier this morning. It's given me a little time to reflect on where things really began to change. So as I said, I started studying Chinese a very, very long time ago. The expectation in those days was we would learn how to read Chinese so that we could do research. That was it. There was no opportunity or expectation that we would speak or interact with real Chinese people in real Chinese contexts. And things began to change for me in the mid-1980s, when I had the opportunity to go to China as a study abroad director and to be the interface for American students in the Chinese context. Since then, that study abroad opportunity and the after effect of that, students integrating into China in various capacities since the mid-1980s has been a real, has really marked a change for my understanding of where the field is going and what our purpose is. More recently, in the last 10 or so years, again, Lucy will talk more about the AP, but the AP exam has really made a difference in the level of the students, the level of Chinese of our students coming into the college environment. For many, many years, we'd have students studying 4, 5 years of Chinese, and they were placed in Chinese 101 because they had never learned anything beyond that. Now we get students who are being placed into our 2nd, 3rd, sometimes 4th year class. It's making us rethink our curriculum, which is great and exciting, but it's also a testament to the excellent job of teaching and standard setting that have, I think, trickled down from having an AP exam. And then finally, the Star Talk program. Again, my own involvement started in 2012, but really my own involvement started when I started getting students coming into our program who had started studying Chinese in high school or middle school in Star Talk programs. And it's created a wonderful buzz, a wonderful student base, and a wonderful, I think, parental support for Chinese language study.
That's very encouraging news about the articulation that's necessary among all levels, but to hear that students are coming in with higher degrees of proficiency and are being placed appropriately is very encouraging. What about at the state level, Ryan? What are you all experiencing there?
Well, you asked about pivotal moments, and I was thinking back over the years what the true pivotal moments were for me with regard to Chinese language. And the first one came the very first week that I was at the Ohio Department of Education. On day one, my colleagues told me, whatever you do, if you get on the elevator and the state superintendent gets on the elevator with you, press the next floor button and get off the elevator, because if you don't, you're going to end up with more work. Friday, I started on a Monday. On Friday, I was in the elevator, and guess who got on the elevator? The state superintendent, who had just read a very evocative report that came out from the Committee on Economic Development calling for, I think, 5% of all American high school students studying Chinese by 2015, I think was the benchmark in that report. So she had read that report, and her first question was, who are you? And I said, I'm your New World Languages consultant. She said, I just read this report that says we should have 5% of high school students in Ohio studying Chinese by the year 2015. Make that happen. And of course, I'm madly pressing buttons trying to get off at the next floor, but she got that out before I got off the elevator. So this former Spanish teacher suddenly realized that as long as he was going to be at the Department of Education, part of his work was going to involve promoting less commonly taught languages, particularly Mandarin Chinese. The second pivotal moment came a number of years later, probably about 3 years ago, and people at the Department of Education kind of know me as a numbers geek. I like to analyze the enrollment trends, particularly related to the different world languages that we offer in the state of Ohio. And about 3 years ago, I had been watching Chinese just skyrocket for every year that I was at the Ohio Department of Education. In fact, when I started back in 2006, out of 2 million K-12 language learners in the state of Ohio, less than 400 were learning Mandarin Chinese. About 3 years ago, we hit 12,000 plus students in the state of Ohio. That, for me, was a moment when I said, this is real. The work that we've been doing is paying off. Our school districts around the state are embracing a language that had not been embraced before in the past. Parents are excited about their kids taking Mandarin Chinese. They're seeing value in the language and in learning the culture relative to their kids' futures. And that was a huge moment. The final pivotal moment came yesterday, actually, at this conference. And I was attending a session led by my counterpart at the North Carolina Department of Education, or Department of Public Instruction, rather. And she posed a question to the audience, and the question was, is Chinese a less commonly taught language anymore? Thinking on what I've been seeing in the data in my state and nationally, that was a very, very interesting question to have asked. In my state, we've seen Chinese go from 9th or 10th most popular or most subscribed language to now it's kind of in the number 3 or number 4 spot. It was the same in her state as well. It had gone from a very low number of students taking the language to, I think, 3rd in her state as well. And I thought, you know, we're only 10 years into this journey, more or less, where there's been a national push to increase Chinese, and we're already asking, is this even a less commonly taught language anymore? That's a powerful question to be asking now, just 10 years in.
That is powerful, and when the enrollment report comes out from American Councils, and NSSFL and Cal and ACTFL have been working on that as well, we'll see where Chinese stands in relationship to the other languages across the board. But certainly, maintaining these programs is a challenge for all of us as well. So, Lucy, let's go to you at the classroom level and the national organization level of class, and here are your pivotal moments.
Well, just like Claudia, she went to China as a study abroad program from United States. I came here United States as a study abroad program from China. And my first stop is Texas, Austin. So now I'm coming here for the national conference. That means that I'm coming back home here. So it's really, the library takes you around. It's really very interesting way to, yeah. I was majored in special ed, and I later was trained as a bilingual teacher. But I think I'm the person never do what I'm supposed to do, 不务正业. So I end up to become a language teacher by chance. At that time, I was teaching at the college. You know, somebody say, "Oh, the Northern New Jersey, some school needs a Chinese teacher." So I say yes. So I drove 45 minutes to teach a 40 minutes class, and I enjoyed it. That's my first career as a public school teacher. And I remember one day one of my students came to see me because at that school, they learn multiple languages. I think that student learned 3 languages, including Chinese. So he said, "No, Mrs. Li, Li Laoshi, we will have a couple of us who will be absent tomorrow." I said, "Why?" "Because many of us are going to take a French AP exam." "Why there's no Chinese AP? Is it Chinese is not important?" That made me feel so hurt because I want my students love what they're doing and think what they're learning is worth it. So I told Terry, say, Li Laoshi is going to do something about it. So that really is the moment I defined my commitment. So that really drove what I have been doing until now. And there's another moment, memorable moment, was back to 2005. I remember that was a winter in December, early December. I think Marty was there as well. Many of us, you know, from the field was invited to go to the Capitol Hill. That was the moment when College Board and the Chinese Embassy jointly announced the launching of a Chinese AP course and the AP exam. So that was a moment very emotional for me because I finally have an answer for my student, Terry. And also, professionally, I'm so touched because I see the collaboration had never happened before, but happened because the AP courses and the exam, the need for the field. I see the heritage schools, the two of them, one that represent the parents, students from mainland China, the other ones represent the student parents from Taiwan, and they worked nicely together. So I want to acknowledge Xu Xiaonong, Teresa Zhao, and Zheng Lianggen. I think Zheng Laoshi is not here, but they work tirelessly and work really joining nicely together. 不分海峡两岸, our mission is try to roots, put a very solid ground for the Chinese education in the United States, and with the help from the College Board, the Asian Society, and Hanban, we really make that happen. So I think that's why we set our common goal. Then class been working together with COT closely. I remember back to that time, we have to go around the school and say, we need to study Chinese. You need to have a Chinese program. They say, why? What does it need for that? I don't think we need to answer that question anymore. They know why they need to have a Chinese program. It's very strong. And very short one, I want to share my happy moment yesterday. That was the last session yesterday. Was together with the Hanban. They reported the recent findings of the HHK result. And they say they found out the teacher using the thematic unit, use the language function, the student performs better. So I think that was the moment validated what we're doing here. So it's great. So it's a very exciting moment.
That's great. We can see it's been a real collaborative effort among a lot of different groups to make this happen, and it's still happening. These pivotal moments are coming,
continue to happen
for all of us. So, Maquita, as the head of a school, the Yuying Public Charter School, Ryan mentioned parents. What are you seeing in terms of community support?
So Yuying opened in the fall of 2008 with 128 students. Nobody thought that people would be interested in coming to Chinese immersion. There was Spanish immersion, there was French immersion, but there was no Chinese immersion. And so I'm happy to say 9 years later, we have 1,400 applicants for about 60 spots. So people really recognize the importance of Chinese. I think the other thing is we're actually changing what sort of the idea Chinese learner looks like. Most of my students look like the people on the panel. I have less than a 3% heritage population. So Chinese language is becoming much more accessible to other people. My second big pivotal moment is when there was a Chinese visit from the White House a couple years ago. We called the White House to kind of advocate. Last year, when there was a Chinese visit, they called us. And so I think that that's pretty important, that they recognize the importance of learning Chinese at such an early language, early age. Yeah.
That's great. Well, you mentioned students, and we're really privileged to have two students. We call them students. They're out in the adult world now, but they did have the Chinese learning experience here in the States. So I'd like to ask Matt first to talk about your pivotal moments in terms of learning Mandarin and making it a career.
Absolutely. So the first thing is, we're definitely still students. There's a saying in Chinese, right? 学然后知不足. You're always, as a teacher, you're always going to be a student. As a student is 终身, it's forever, right? The first big pivotal moment for me was actually when I was 11 years old, when I first came back from China, when I decided that I was going to learn Chinese. I had spent 3 months learning Shanghainese by accident. And that's a little bit of a long story, so we don't have to get into it. But I came home and told my parents that I wanted to learn real Chinese. So I did that. I started learning Chinese with a teacher one-on-one at age 11. My next big moment was actually my first interaction with StarTalk in Charlotte, North Carolina. At age 14, I started going to a StarTalk program for the first time. And who knew that this program would end up employing me for 4 years and will be paying for my graduate school starting in August of this year. So those were two huge moments for me in Chinese. The next was when I studied abroad in college. And that was the first time that I really understood that language and culture are inseparable. And the reason that I understood that was because I don't remember a single moment where my Chinese teacher sat down and looked at me and told me that when somebody hands you something, you take it with 2 hands. Nobody told me that when you go to a restaurant in China, the waiter's gonna ignore you until you yell 服务员, and then he comes. But we sat down in China for our first meal as a group of study abroad students, again, looking like the people on this panel. And without thinking about it, we're in Beijing, right? So I just yelled, 服务员, and he came over, he said, and he brought the menu, and then he left. And everybody was looking at me, just like they're doing right now. They were like, what are you doing? And I was like, that's what you do, right? That's normal. So I realized that I had been so lucky to have a teacher that spent so long teaching me not just words, but teaching me to interact with people that I otherwise would have no method to interact with. And my last big pivotal moment, I think, was the first time that I had real external validation of studying Chinese. There's a few people in the audience, Wang Laoshi right there, that witnessed last year when I had the opportunity to go to Boston and compete in Hanyu Qiao. And I was lucky enough to win first place at UMass Boston's Hanyu Qiao last year. And then my seventh semester of college, I took the official OPI, and I scored superior on the OPI, which was the first time that I had external validation for studying Chinese and realized that we can do this, that you don't have to be Chinese to speak Chinese well. That Chinese isn't impossible, that if I can do it, everybody can do it. So those are my moments.
Great, great.
Kevin.
Yeah, Matt, 莎莎诺. Yeah, so I'd like to, I really concur with a lot of Matt's sentiment. I also studied abroad at Peking University. And so, and what was really important for me was having Chinese roommates when I was in Beijing. And not having American friends in the beginning, and just integrating myself with Chinese, which Matt and I were talking about this, creates that motivation to have social interaction. Because if I have my social interaction with Americans, I'm not really lonely anymore. But if I have that feeling of I need to interact with someone, I'm driven by that motivation, that human instinct to interact. And that really drove me to keep learning Mandarin. And then once I have Chinese friends, I want to go deeper. I want to have a deeper social interaction, and the only way to do that was to keep learning Mandarin. But I want to talk about 3 pivotal points of learning Chinese, and I'm going to put it around for those kind of Chinese learners and whatnot. You know, it's pinyin, Chinese characters, and the tones. And I have an example for each one. First, it's pinyin. And you learn pinyin. I was learning pinyin, but my tones and characters were terrible. But then I found out that when you sing a song, there are no tones. And this, for me, was a really big breakthrough. Okay, oh, I can sing. Okay, I can sing songs. So then I would go to KTV, and I'd be an all-star. And then I'd try to speak Chinese, and no one knows what I'm saying. And I'm like, what a strange predicament. So that was a pretty big breakthrough. That was one. 2 was the characters. I have a terrible memory, and a lot of Chinese characters in the beginning is just hard memorization. And what I did learn at Peking University, they did an intensive course on radicals. And then I go, okay, so Chinese characters are like Lego blocks.
Yes.
You just learn 60 little radicals, and then the rest you just build. And it's just like building my little spaceship when I was a kid with my Legos. Okay, I got that. That was a really big breakthrough for me. And then what's the last one? Tones. Oh, then the tones was, one day I was kind of complaining to a Chinese-American friend at Peking, and I was like, why are they always saying, fuyar, fuyar? And then she goes, you know, when you make fun of Chinese, your tones are actually really good. I go, really? And she goes, you need to do that more. And Matt and I were just talking about this. It's kind of like leaving your American accent behind and just trying to become Chinese. Yeah. And don't think about being an American. Just try to be a Chinese. And making fun of people is one of the best ways. Funny enough, because you take on so much that you didn't even realize was there, which is hard for you to identify. Tones are really hard to identify as a non-tonal language speaker. Yeah. So those are the top 3. And then I will say my first Chengyu was always 美梦成真. And that was always my favorite. And I always, after being in Peking University for a year, I always wanted to work for a Chinese company. As you saw yesterday, I now work for WeChat. And my big moment was the end of last year when I gave a 10-minute talk in Chinese to 500, graduates from colleges who were also entering Tencent, and to Pony Ma. And I gave it all in Chinese, and my legs were shaking, but my tones held strong, so I was happy that worked out. Yeah, thanks.
That's great. That's great. I want to continue a little bit on that theme and remind everybody, if you aren't familiar with the celebrity chef Marcus Samuelsson, he was born in Ethiopia, grew up in Sweden, and lives in Manhattan. And someone asked him, how do you move so easily from one culture to another? And he said, I'm very comfortable being uncomfortable. And so I'd like to ask anyone on the panel, but especially the students, about, as we help our students move toward global competence, which we heard about yesterday from Tony Jackson, and how important that journey is, how do we help move them out of their comfort zone, but help them be comfortable with being uncomfortable?
I think for me, I have a quick story. The first time that I was really uncomfortable actually was the first time that I went to Star Talk. Actually, no, the second year. It had to be the second year. The second year, I placed into the only heritage class that they had because of the way that I had been learning Chinese. And for some reason, the teacher that I had only spoke in the third person. So she only talked about herself. She never said 我. She always said 陈老师. But the thing is, everybody else seemed to always understand what was going on. And I didn't. I had no idea who Chen Laoshi was. She would say things like, 陈老师让你过来. And I just sat there because I didn't know where to go. It's not that I didn't understand her, I just didn't know who she was talking about. And finally, it's Friday, I'm tired, and I'm like, she calls on me, and I said, 请问陈老师是谁? And she looked at me for a really long time. Everybody looked at me. And she said, 我就是陈老师. And it all made sense, right? So, and that weekend actually is the very first time that I had a dream in Chinese. So I felt better about myself coming back to Star Talk the next Monday. But that was really the most uncomfortable I had ever felt in a Chinese class. Because it was the first time I didn't know what was going on. But that was also the summer that I learned the most Chinese in a Star Talk program. So it has its benefits, right? Being uncomfortable is the only way that you learn. If you stay in your 你好, 谢谢, 再见, you're never going to learn anything. You have to be in situations where you don't understand what the other person is saying. You have to learn when it's okay to fake it and learn when you should ask them what they're actually saying. When you didn't understand directions, you should understand them, you know? So being uncomfortable is the only way to learn a language. But I think the responsibility that falls on everybody sitting here is showing your students that they can understand you despite being uncomfortable. It's acting, being a teacher, you're so many things. You're an artist, you're a cheerleader, you're kind of a babysitter sometimes, unfortunately. You're a parent, you're a mime, you're a singer and a dancer. You do so many things to make your students understand. And we're uncomfortable. What we don't know and what I didn't know until I became a teacher is that the teacher's uncomfortable too. Is that we're not positive all the time that what we say is going to get through. We don't know if our lessons are going to matter. We don't know if you're going to be interested. So we're all uncomfortable. And when the student understands that the teacher's uncomfortable and that you might struggle with English or you might struggle with math or you might struggle with history, that you're just like them and that you're not this inaccessible person behind a podium, we relax a little bit more, and then we can cooperate a little bit better.
Very good. Kevin? Yeah.
So Chinese is not the first second language I learned. The first second language I learned was Spanish. And it's funny, a lot of people say, oh, what do they call it? Like 语言人才 or like
天才.
Yeah, 天才.
天赋.
天赋, that's it, 语言天赋. And you're just one of those savants that just learns languages like it's nothing. And actually, in high school, I was all A's and then B's in Spanish. And I had this moment, you know? No way, I'm not letting that happen. And I went and lived abroad in Spain for a year. So I'm kind of a serial study abroad guy. And so I really like how Marty set up this question, comfortable with being uncomfortable. I think that the only time you learn, or one of the best times you learn, is when you're uncomfortable. And this carries on from languages to your career. When I got into my career after 2.5 years, they said, okay, if you're really comfortable with your role, you should think about switching to something else. And you should think about if you're doing something, maybe as a teacher to bring it to you guys, you should try a new program. You should try a new strategy. You should try new things and see how they work. So I had studied abroad in Spain, and what was so important about that is that it just made me really uncomfortable. And kind of like I said earlier, I had to learn Spanish to interact with people. And I'm a really social person, so that was a huge motivator for me. So when I went to China later on, again, I had to speak Chinese if I wanted to interact with people. I even had an interesting situation where there was a lot of Americans in Beijing at the school, and they would just kind of party and just speak English with each other, and I'm like, okay, I'm definitely not going to hang out with this crew. And after 7 months of only speaking Mandarin in the classes at Beida, one of them needed help ordering something because his Chinese wasn't improving fast enough. So I helped him out, and I said, oh, yeah, 你应该这样说. And I just helped him out, and I spoke to him in English, and he goes, dude, you speak English? I was like, yeah, dude. And he goes, dude, we all thought you were Russian. And then Matt told me about, and the other students talked about this Chinese language promise that you take these kids from, students from Yale, and they would be a part of a program, and some of them would have to pay a lot of extra money, and I think luckily Matt's getting scholarships over here, and they would take a language pledge. And these people would talk to me like, man, I really wish I was a part of that program because then I could pledge to only speak Chinese. And I was like, what? You don't need anyone else to pledge that you don't speak Chinese or don't speak English. Just don't speak English. Just speak Chinese. And that seemed like it's kind of a foreign concept. So I think it is comfortable with being uncomfortable, and you have to force yourself to do that. You have to make promises with yourselves and make goals. Yeah.
That's great. Yeah. So many.
Well, we all know that the key to sustaining successful programs is in effective classroom practice, and there have been so many organizations that have supported professional development for teachers, Start Talk, Class, Successful, the guest teacher program, the College Board. So I'd like to start, though, because our classroom practice is informed by research, asking Claudia about the research in the last 10 years. What have we learned about effective classroom practice, and how have we communicated that to the teaching force?
All right, so that, Marty, is a more complicated question for me than you think, because I have to go back and think about my own classroom practices first, and then the research that I've been involved in second. So my own classroom practices changed when I did my first ACTFL oral proficiency workshop with Cindy Ning, who's here, I know, because I was speaking to her earlier. And it turned my whole life around. Although I myself have been, an aggressive Chinese language learner, that's sort of my own way of doing things, and I love the guys sitting next to me, although they both progress much higher on the proficiency scale than I have. I hadn't really thought about communicative-based classroom until that experience. And so I began becoming much more interested in what that meant. Some of you know I'm a textbook author. I sort of, in the academic area, I do two things. Write reference grammars, which are really not communicative-based. You don't take a reference grammar and put it in the classroom. But the other is thinking about how to take material that's designed for classroom use and make it communication-focused. So I've been thinking about that and sort of working on that. It's always a work in progress, but it's really important. So in terms of research, how some of this is not research-based, but some of this is just practitioner-based. How setting standards in communication that really force you to think about what you're doing in your classroom and forcing you to think about how you make your students both excited and uncomfortable at the same time about learning a language. And then there is the other research part. So I started off doing different kind of research. My field was in theoretical syntax, but I've been teaching Chinese since 1980. So that's my real field. And in the last maybe 10 or so years, I've been becoming more and more interested in the literacy development part of it. So our Start Talk program is a teacher program, and it's really focused on exploring research that exists in literacy development, and then taking the research findings and putting it into the classroom in standards-based, student-centered, communication-focused classrooms, right? So there's a lot of research out there that we are bringing in to that group of teachers that we work with every summer. And then at the same time as we work on this, we're discovering the areas that there isn't enough research in. There's a lot of room for research in literacy development, right. Especially, and again, this is not just for Chinese, it is how you build higher level literacy skills. Again, there's probably more work in this area in English than in any other language, but we still don't there is no blueprint. Right? And we don't know all of the benchmarks, and we don't know how to reach them, but we know that it's really important. So again, in that area, I think a tremendous amount of research is open for anybody who is interested in getting involved in that.
Right. Sounds like something we need to work on in the future, and we do have the research priorities grants that we give from ACTFL, so that's an area to look at. Lucy, you've had a long career in the classroom. Talk about a transformation you have made from maybe a more traditional teaching approach to a communicative teaching approach, and certainly thinking about that 5th C of the national standards, and how do you help students see the use for language beyond the classroom?
I think I want to echo what we just talked about, feel comfortable, feel not comfortable. But when I start becoming a teacher for K-12 students, in the public school, I feel very uncomfortable when I'm sitting in the faculty meeting. Because I don't know what they're talking about. What is standard? Because my teacher never taught me that way. Yeah. So, but I feel so uncomfortable. I think I want the feeling. So that's why I try to dig in more and then learn more about what the standard is about. And when I was in the classroom, then the student will come to me, hey, my Spanish teacher do this activity. And so, oh, okay, so let's try. We're doing this thing here in our Chinese classroom as well. So I think, try to be comfortable feel not comfortable that way. I think I as a profession, I think I push myself and I encourage all the teachers here and try to step out of the comfort zone. Because that's the way we taught. Just let's everybody open up a book, page 60. Okay, let's read through the vocabulary. Let's do the pattern drill. That you put a student to sleep.
That's right.
Yeah. That's the reality. Yes. Yeah. So also because my background trained as a special ed teacher, and I taught a preschool when I was in Hong Kong, so I know too many explanations doesn't really work. You have to get them to work, to really do something. Yeah. So I think that kind of helped me feeling what the standard-based, really get students to perform, get students to be involved, not just teacher talk, that kind of style. So it's a long journey for me because I think right when I first started that in the late 70s, when I first came to the United States, I began to teach in the late 80s. At that time, we don't have any training, we don't have any good material around. So I have to say to everybody here, you don't know how lucky you are now. And there's a lot of things available. All you needed to do is to reach out, and you really need to mainstream yourself to become a standard-based teacher. And I mentioned I was so happy to yesterday at that workshop presentation made by Director Li from Hanban, to validate what we're doing, because HSK is such a traditional test, and the result is, whoever the teacher use more thematic unit or language function approach, the students score higher. Okay, I don't mean this test score is that important, but really that's the research you mentioned. That's some validation we needed to get. So let's do it the right way. Let's do it together. So make our Chinese learner happy, and they really know what they're learning is meaningful.
I don't know the equivalent in Mandarin for the elephant in the room, but I think our elephant in the room this morning is how do we build our teacher capacity in the field. We did an analysis of the 2016-2017 U.S. Department of Education statistics on the number of states saying that they had a severe language teacher or bilingual teacher shortage. And we know this is impacting our programs already. 44 states plus the District of Columbia are talking about critical teacher shortages. So I'd like to turn to Maquita and Ryan at this point and talk about your experience with building the teacher capacity and how you're handling it in your situations.
Want to go first?
Ladies first.
Okay. So we've had to be really creative with trying to find teachers. We're lucky enough to have a partnership with NYU where we bring their student teachers, we bring their students and we come have them do an internship at our school for a week. And we expose them to immersion programs. We also offer them to do demo lessons, and if they're really good, we keep them at our school for fellowships. And so we're trying to create a pipeline of immersion teachers. I think one of our struggles is that although they might be Chinese language teachers, they're not elementary school teachers, or they're not preschool teachers, and nobody has any elementary pedagogy, so it's a problem. We try to train them early on. I think we also try to work with other local universities and other school systems to share best practice. So that's what we've basically done to sort of create our own programs.
Marty, I think the first thing we need to address is teacher retention. Because I look around this room and I see many awesome teachers out there. But you all know in the audience that teaching is a very hard thing to do. The demands on the profession are great. And sadly, we lose wonderful teachers because they either don't have the tools that they need, they don't have the support that they have. So I think the first thing we need to do is make sure that we are retaining those teachers by providing them with a professional development and a framework of supports that will enable them to be successful and overcome the many challenges that they do face in their day-to-day lives in working with kids. Thankfully, we have great resources. We've got world readiness standards from ACTFL. We've got the necessful ACTFL can-do statements. And I love those statements because they frame learning in a can-do way, both for learners and for instructors. Something that Lucy said really resonates with me, and that's that so many teachers say, but I didn't teach this way. So that's where that, taking the research that people like Claudia are doing in her institutions, and at the State Department of Education level, translating that research into can-do terms for our teachers so that they know what best practices are, what they look like in the classroom, and how they can embrace them. You probably remember 2 years ago at the ACTFL Assembly of Delegates, I gave a little talk on shift happens, right? That's shift with an F in there, folks. And there is this tremendous paradigm shift that's happening now. We're finally kind of loosening those reins of grammar translation and audiolingualism that had tethered us for so many years. But we have teachers that have been in the classroom for 15 and 20 years. This is how they've done it. So we're asking them to make a tremendous shift in their practices. And without providing them the supports, it's very difficult for them to adopt new practices and truly embrace communicative and proficiency-based language learning. And then with what Nikita was saying, the programs like the Chinese guest teacher program from College Board, smaller programs like the Teachers of Critical Languages program from the U.S. State Department, these are great programs, and they've really allowed us to help start up some programs and help to maintain programs to this point. But if we're truly going to sustain and build capacity across the teaching profession in Mandarin Chinese, we really do need to be attracting the young people like we've got here on the stage who have found the way to attain high levels of proficiency, who are able to shine and who are able to show, I think as Matt said, that anyone truly can learn Chinese if given the right circumstances. It all comes down to good teaching and learning practices. So congratulations, guys, for highlighting that important point for us.
That's great. And Matt, you actually mentioned, even as a new teacher, that you're interested in trying to change the way Mandarin is taught. So give us a little bit of insight there about what you're talking about.
Sure. So one of the things, right, as I rose through the ranks in Star Talk and went from being a student to a teacher's assistant to, for the last 4 years, being a lead teacher in the classroom, is understanding what it means to use I can statements in the room and use a proficiency-based model and not be the one in the front of the room saying, 念课文, 生词, 语法. Because let me tell you, as a student, it's so boring to do that. It's okay at the beginning, but the truth is without a proficiency-based model, if I don't have to talk, I'm not going to remember anything. I don't feel uncomfortable. I don't have a need to communicate with anybody. So you ask me to talk about buying a house, but I'm only 13. I'm not going to buy a house, right? So we think about what students actually need, right? And the other big thing that I've thought about a lot recently, and actually I'm hoping to maybe submit a proposal to a conference and talk about, is we talk about authentic resources, right? We talk about authentic resources that are accessible to students. You as Chinese teachers, we as Chinese teachers are so lucky. Because Hanzi, let me tell you, are the best authentic resources on the planet. They're so easy to explain. They're so easy to make into stories. And they're so easy to be memorable and meaningful to students. And every single word in the Chinese language has Hanzi. So you want to talk about a simple example, right? You talk about if you use integrated Chinese to teach, the first lesson in the very first book is 问候, right? And then you have 姓. 贵姓, you have mama, you have all these characters. 姓, we can talk about 姓. It's a woman and birth. Why? Because in the oldest recorded Chinese society, you got your last name from your mom. Why? Because 没有亲子鉴定, 好不好? 爸爸是谁我们不知道，你娘是谁我们可以肯定的，对吧? Right? So 姓, and then you look at Yao Ming. Every student on the planet knows Yao Ming. You look at his last name Yao. Why does it have 女字旁? Because it's one of the oldest last names in the language. These are easy things. 男人的男, 田, li. Because what do men do? 干活. Right? Right? So these are things that students can access from the very first day. And when you grab that interest, it's what happened to me. When my teacher explained things to me, we talk about we as teachers teach how we were taught, right? So I used to think that that's how everybody taught, that you taught Chinese by explaining the nature of the language, by explaining what Hanzi are. And you think about things, the example I gave a student not that long ago is a respirator in English. A respirator is what in Chinese? 呼吸机. Why? It's so much, you see, it's so much easier in Chinese. It's a breathing machine. What's a volcano in Chinese? Fire mountain, right? These things are so accessible to students, but students are not going to figure them out on their own. You're their coach, you're their leader. You are the person that as soon as you show them that pattern, they've got it. And then they're going to be more curious. They're going to go from mama and 姐姐 and 妹妹. And they're going to see, oh, 奶奶, that's a woman too. Oh, 阿姨, woman, 姑姑, woman. And then all of a sudden, they found the pattern. All of a sudden, they're interested. And every time they see 女字旁, they're going to be the first one to tell you. So we're lucky. We have these resources available to us. And exactly like Zhu Laoshi said, we have to teach in the way that is best for the students, not just in the framework that we were taught.
That's a great ending for our discussion. I've enjoyed it. You can see the many successes that we've had over the past 10 years. And we have a national report, America's Languages, Investing in Language Education for the 21st Century, which has just been released. In addition to that, we have launched a public awareness campaign called Lead with Languages to create a movement in the United States toward building our language capacity, toward interesting young people in learning languages and informing their parents and also heritage parents and heritage learners about the assets that knowing another language can bring to them personally and also professionally. So we invite you to go to the website and to get on board with this national campaign. We have a lot of initiatives going on around it, and together we can not only look backward, but move forward, because we have experienced a lot of successes and we know the path that we need to stay on. So I want to thank the panel for their wonderful commentary and insights today, and thank all of you and the College Board and the Asia Society for coming together in this really special way. Thank you.